What's good, gamers? God, I really need to grow my hair out again. I am not used to short hair Stevie. Maybe I'll wear like dark glasses to cover it up. Maybe it'll distract people more. What's up, guys? So recently, I wanted to take a little dive back into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, I play mainly at locals, but I can't really go to events for specific reasons. But one thing I do love is competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Who would have surprised that the guy on a pro team likes to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And the one thing I managed to attend was a case tournament. It was a pretty big case tournament. There were a lot of high-profile players within the area. Definitely people were taking this super seriously because a Rage of the Abyss was on the line and everybody wanted those fool losses. And me, I decided to play Drytron at first because in a lobby, I had no intention of like taking the format seriously. I felt very, very bored with Snake Eye and Fiendsmith and Yuba. I just could not force myself to play a deck where I personally had no enjoyment of playing. So I was just going to take Drytron and basically mess around at this event. Till I got into a call with my friend Austin at 3 a.m. while we were playing Teamfight Tactics. And in this call, Austin said, Stevie, I'm gonna be real. Maybe you shouldn't play some dog shit deck like Drytron. Play a deck that you're actually good at, that actually has a pretty good meta call, which he said was Labyrinth. And I like Labyrinth a lot. I think it's one of the most fun decks I've ever played, right next to like Emancipator when that deck was at full power. But he mentioned that there would be a lot of Fire King players and that Sex Cannon's pretty good into that deck, as well as there's a lot of Tenpai, which Lab has a very strong matchup against, assuming you don't get like Ash Impulse. And after a little bit of debate and, you know, just like workshopping it out, I was like, you know what, Austin, you're right. I'm gonna roll up to this event with Lab, and I went 5-1. My only loss was against Fire King, where I bricked 2 games in a row and there was nothing I could do. And in top 8, I got full comboed by Memento twice. Like, what could I really do? But we did walk away with a bunch of packs. We did walk away with a newly found sense of entitlement, and I have committed myself to playing Labyrinth for the rest of human history. This is truly God's greatest trap deck. Unless Malice comes out. At least until Malice comes out. God, I hope Malice isn't better than Labyrinth. But I'm going to give you my current list. I'm going to give you guys a little breakdown on what I think Lab does super duper well, and of course a lot of the secret super duper technology cards that you guys can of course put into your Labyrinth decks. But for now, here is Sex Lab. So here's the list. If all you wanted was the card by card, you could be a little freak and not support the channel and just click off. But if you're a real gamer, you'll at least mute the tab and watch the video all the way through. So here is furniture / IKEA Lab, and yes, I coined that term first. So the general idea of why I decided to play Labyrinth in this specific format is that Lab doesn't really have any losing matchups. There are decks like Memento that have very, very bad matchups into decks like Tenpai or Ritual Beast because they play cards like Dimension Shifter, and those matchups are extremely one-sided once those cards resolve. Like, if you get like shifted on Memento, like extend a handshake, dog, you're cooked. So I didn't want to play any decks that had basically auto loss cards. Additionally, I didn't want to try and play Snake Eye Fire King or Snake Eye Fiendsmith or like Yubel Fiendsmith at the last minute because I personally do not like playing decks with high Garnet ratios, as well as decks that have very high skill ceilings. Like if you mess up with Fire King or Rescue Ace, you will want to like shoot yourself. Those decks are so hard, it's not even funny. But Labyrinth is a deck that I have not only played extremely extensively, I think I've been playing this deck for like a year and a half now, as well as the fact that this deck doesn't really have any losing matchups in the same way where Memento or Ritual Beast or blah 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 might have, or in their own aspects. It does lose to generic cards. Like if you get Lightning Stormed when you set forward, you're kind of sad. If you get like Ash Blossomed or Impulsed on Big Welcome, you're really sad. But you could technically say that about like almost any deck.
Where it's like, oh, if you draw X card versus my Y card and I don't have extender, then I lose the game.
I decided to just be like, fuck it, I'm just gonna bite this bullet. If I get hand trapped to death into full Tenpai OTK, then inshallah, they are truly God's gifted duelists. And this is the version that I settled on. I settled on playing Furniture Lab because I predicted that the format that we were going to enter, you could not just sit on a bunch of trap cards the same way you could do with like Floodgate or Stun Lab. The main reason why I don't like Stun Lab is because although it has a really high propensity in being able to say crack boards or just have a very strong turn turn 1 game plan by just being able to like set 5, turn your brain off, and get access to your engine, you are not able to really play if you ever get stopped. If you get like, since the deck has a very weird consistency issue in the sense where you're not really playing cards like Ariana or the furniture, and your only ways to get to your engine are big, small, trap trick, and maybe hard opening lady, which you never really want to do, but you know, it kind of it will lead to like these weird hands where you're gonna open nothing but like stun traps, and you're not able to, and sometimes like all you can do is just stun your opponent turn after turn, and your opponent's able to eventually start playing while you're just praying to God that your opponent doesn't Ash Blossom you once you find a welcome trap. And additionally, if they Ash Blossom your welcome trap, you kind of lose on the spot. Like at least with this deck, like if your Ariana gets ashed or impermed, you can at least like, you know, set 4 and pray to Christ that you're not getting OTK'd in the follow-up, or you have like certain combos like the furniture combos to at least keep you extending and do little monster mash shenanigans. You get stopped in Trap Lab, you lose the game. That is one of the big reasons why I'm not a big fan of the stun version of this deck overall, and I decided to play this version. Now you may be saying,
Stevie, I heard you mention in previous videos that you think Labyrinth is not very good with the furniture version in this format because every card has to go 3 for 1 or 2 for 1 with the furniture.
well, that problem is remedied by Mulcharmy Fualos and his weird brother Perulia. So these cards give you the absolute nutter butter ability to go second and to actually do something with the cards you draw. Other decks are able to, you know, they're just able to like draw hand traps, draw extenders, but sometimes in certain decks, those extenders kind of overlap, like drawing Wanted and drawing Diabellstar are just drawing 2 copies of the same card. Drawing multiple like normal summons isn't great, but in this deck, a lot of the cards serve very different functions, as well as they are able to serve as individual powerful one-ofs that are able to like do their own thing. Like drawing multiple furniture is fine because you're able to pitch, because you're able to get 2 activations of your furniture effects in Stevie and Chandra. Drawing multiple traps is fine because guess what? You're gonna set them all anyways. Nothing really changes. Drawing multiple copies of Arius is fine because you're able to use one on your opponent's turn in order to set some sort of blowout trap. Think of Sex Cannon, Overroot, Daruma, Trap Tricks, or you're able to save one for your own turn, and you're able to special out maybe a Lovely Lab that you hard drew, or you can not forcibly commit yourself to a normal summon and grab like an Ariane or an Ariana or even a Lady if you need to just beat over something really cool. A lot of these cards in these decks serve very different special unique functions, and being able to just have a massive grip of them, they're able to just vomit out onto the board at literally any point and have some sort of additional meaningful effect is something that I really do appreciate in Fualos and Perulia that I personally, I mean, I'm just repeating myself, but these are just the greatest Labyrinth cards of all time. They're the greatest Eddie cards of all time. Actually, this one is, but don't let anyone tell you that. But with that, let's get into the deck profile. We're running 3 Ariana, best normal summon. When she summons, she searches any lab card. Ariana plus almost any other lab card is basically a combo in itself, because Ariana plus a furniture, you can just grab Kuklock and do like the little Kuklock furniture shenanigans. Ariana plus a trap, you can just grab Kuklock or Arius, and you can, you know, do a little turn 1 trap action. If you already have a way to activate a trap card turn 1, think of like with Kuklock or Arius, you're able to grab maybe Lady and maybe just tutor for like any one of your bomb traps that you have in the main or to the side. And if you get shiftered, the best card you could search if you already have access to your engine is Labyrinth Setup. This card is so good under Shifter, but we'll get to that later. Additionally, her second effect is Monster Leave Field by Trap Effect. We're just going to call it the second effect of all these guys, is that she draws a card, and if you do, you can either special summon a Fiend monster or set a spell or trap. And being able to do that is very, very scary when you actually do it in practice. Ariane also has this effect, and it may not seem that scary on paper, but when you actually put this deck into action, this deck's ability to play on other people's turns is disgustingly frightening. Think of it like this. You're able to get a search off of Ariana. Let's say you want to search Arius. When you grab your Arius, you're going to get your draw off of Ariane, and if it's a trap that you want to activate, you're like, cool, I'm just gonna keep it in hand so that I can use Ariane's in-hand effect, send it to the graveyard, and maybe activate a Daruma that you basically just grabbed out of your deck for free. Or maybe you could just grab 2 draws and just keep piling on additional advantage. Being able to generate as much advantage as possible as you can in this deck is how you win games and matches, and I thanked my lucky stars every time I drew like 2 cards a turn, every time I Ariana'd into like a Daruma cannon and I had the Arias in hand, and I'm like, it was insane. Ariana, the GOAT. Arcane is a little weird. So she doesn't have an on summon effect, but she does have an ignition effect where you can send a normal trap from your hand or that's set on your field to the graveyard to special summon a level 4 or lower fiend monster from your deck in defense position outside of herself. Yes, you can summon the Dark Barrier statue. No, don't play it. Ariane's main purpose is to grab you Ariana, and if you're already Ariana, yes, you can grab a furniture, but we're mainly talking about her sister here. But Ariane being able to grab Ariana is really poggers, because Ariana can either search you an additional engine piece that'll just like let you extend. She's able to get rid of, think of redundant traps, like think of it in scenarios where you open like double welcome. She's able to convert those sort of traps into meaningful on-field advantage because she's able to grab the Ariana, and then you grab like a big welcome or whatever engine piece you're missing, and then the secret reason why you play this card is because you can make Bagushka. Oh my god, Bagushka the fucking GOAT. I'm just going to talk about Bagushka right now because we're kind of talking about rank 4s. Fun fact, Perulia and Fuloras are level 4s, so keep that in mind. Bagushka is really good right now. There are not a lot of decks that like playing under Bagushka. There are not a lot of decks that want to play into Bagushka. Bagushka usually requires your opponent to commit a normal summon, or at the very least 2 extenders to sort of make like an SP Little Knight, and 9 out of 10 times they would rather just like, I don't know, pass the turn. Like nobody wants to hand loop themselves for 3 against the trap deck just in order to out like 1 Bagushka. And even if they do out the Bagushka, they're like, yes, I have spent 3 to 4 cards outing this 1 floodgate. Oh shit, the lab player still has 4 back row. It is kind of like this lose-lose scenario that you're able to put people in, and in certain matchups this card just like wins the game on the spot. Like against Tenpai, your opponent better pray to god they open like Droplet or Regegi or Imperm. There's actually a lot of outs to this card, but whatever. But Ariane draws cards, able to grab you more engine pieces. If this card sets rollback, you're basically the greatest duelist on planet Earth. You can send Big Welcome. You can send a set Big Welcome in order to play around stuff like Imperm or Valor, because you could just use the graveyard effect of Big Welcome in order to bounce the Arianes back to hand, and then you can just basically win $1 million bajillion. Next, we're playing one lady. She grabs trap cards from the deck. She's also your win con in certain matchups. Tell me how Sky Striker outs this card. No, you can't say Jamming Waves because that deck doesn't play it. Lady Lab, just very efficient card, very big beater. She's got a big booty of 2900 defense. She can't be destroyed by card effects or targeted. She just has so many layers of protection that's just very frustrating to play against. She's just very good. Unfortunately, she doesn't really do anything on her own, and she's extremely tutorable, so you play her at 1, and you will see that as a common trend within this deck. Speaking of tutorable cards that you play at 1, we have Lovely Lab. This card is the bane of everyone's existence, including your own, because she is able to, with her super secret effect, your opponent can activate monster effects in response to the activation of your normal trap cards. So if your opponent lets like a little Welcome Lab sneak by, or an Arias summon Lovely out of hand, you could just like flip Daruma Cannon or Sex Cannon, and your opponent just is like, oh shit, I can't do anything. That's not good. And then they're like very sad. They're just like, oh shit, I guess I lose here, because they let the spell speed for board wipe go through. Additionally, her second secret effect is able to just continually set these super duper powerful cards turn after turn after turn after turn. Think of Daruma Cannon or your Welcomes, or even just like 1-for-1 cards like Imperm or Impulse. Lovely truly just does it all. Additionally, the hand rip effect when a monster leaves the field, oh my god. So many times in so many scenarios you're just gonna be like, yeah, I'll just summon Lovely turn 1. Who's gonna stop me? Because you're gonna rip a card out of your opponent's hand, all of your back row is gonna be insulated, and your opponent's gonna feel very threatened by the fact that basically a non-targeting Raigeki break that's also a hand rip is gonna be staring them down in the face, and there's basically just like nothing they can do outside of just like, alright, tunnel vision in, remove the Lovely, or die trying. However, she is also the bane of your existence. She is without a doubt the worst card to draw in the deck. And I say this as a deck that plays like Fuelos and Perulia. It is worse to draw Lovely than it is to draw these cards, because at least with these cards, you can like pitch them for a furniture, sure, whatever. But if you draw this, you're like, oh, well, you can just pitch it with a furniture or an Arius or whatever. If your opponent has a Bestial, you're fucked. If your opponent has DD Crow, you're fucked. If your opponent has like any way of removing this out of the graveyard, you're not having a fun time. Labyrinth turns from one of the most efficient engines of all time into a basically gutter truck the second it loses access to Lovely. You want to protect her at all costs, but the rewards are very much worth it. Turns where you're able to keep Lovely on the board and keep her advantage machine going. Each additional turn basically just is one additional nail in the coffin. First of all, triple Arius, because we want to draw her. She is the best going second card in the entire deck, up there with Fulos and Impulse. I'm sorry, Imperm, but you're not that good anymore. I mean, you are good, but not compared to her. Arius says, during the main phase, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon a Labyrinth monster, or set one normal trap from your hand that can be activated this turn. So, going first, you're able to do stuff like set Welcome and activate Welcome. Gets basically stranded trap cards out of your hand. You can even do stuff like special Lovely to protect hands where you want to normal Ariana and maybe do like a weird furniture line, and you want to severely protect yourself from cards like Ash Blossom. You can do stuff like special Ariane if you don't want to commit to a normal summon. Arius just does so much. And the number one thing that she does is set trap cards on your opponent's turn that you definitely should not be able to do. Think of like sex cannoning or Daruma cannoning like your opponent. What are they gonna do? Send the handshake? Probably. Just absolutely broken card. And you play her at 3 because, oh my god, you want to draw her. Not too many of her. Too many of her is like really bad. But the most suspect ratio obviously here is the 3-2-1. Now, why this specific ratio? One is that Ku-Klok is super duper searchable. You don't ever actually want to like open Ku-Klok. Ku-Klok's like fine to grab over the course of a combo. Ku-Klok rotations are how you're able to do specific stuff with like Lady Lab, and you set a card and then you like you big welcome and you grab Ku-Klok out of the deck, bounce it back, and then you use the Ku-Klok, and then you can activate whatever you set off of the lady. That all is fine and dandy. But people are like, oh, why aren't you playing more Stevie? Stevie is like the best one. It lets you summon a card. We are not playing enough link payoffs that I feel that Stevie is necessary. Stevie being on the board makes you more susceptible to cards like Nibiru. Yes, you can get Nibiru in Lab. It's happened more than once. It makes you more susceptible to cards like Super Poly. It makes you more susceptible to cards like Dominus Impulse on Stevie. I don't know why they wouldn't just Stevie the big welcome, but you know, whatever it takes. Stevie loses to a lot more cards or puts you in like way more weird board states that you'd rather not be in relative to Chandelier, which just adds itself back and is way more poggers. Additionally, Chandelier's level 3, and that comes up for XE stuff. So stupid that it does, but you know, just gotta keep that in mind. But out of the two furnitures, Stevie is the most cuttable in the sense where if you're looking for a card to shave, the third Stevie is completely fine because 5 furnitures is still definitely a lot, especially when you consider the fact that you might draw multiples of these cards with cards like Perulia and Fulos. Next up, we got the spells. There are 2, whole deck. That includes a side deck. We've got 1 Labyrinth and 1 Labyrinth setup. Labyrinth is a very, 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 very good card in certain matchups. Labyrinth allows you to, if you activate a set Welcome Lab normal trap, you can add this additional effect to that card's effect at resolution, which is to also after that destroy a card on the field. And additionally, if you activate a non-Labyrinth normal trap card, you can special summon a fiend from your hand or graveyard. That's non-targeting, so keep that in mind. It's very broken at summoning a freshly bounced Ariana off of like a big welcome. But the pop effect is very, very dangerous because a lot of people won't play around it. They'll be like, oh, I guess I'll chain the card that you're gonna pop with Labyrinth. Nope, you cannot. It does not target, does it all in one effect. Better making sure your opponent pays attention. And in specific matchups where your opponent kind of needs like certain bodies to stick, or they want certain cards to stick onto the board, think like Sangan Summoning or like a normal summon Tenpai, this card does absolute one. Now this is one of the easier cards to take out. There are a lot of cards in this main deck that are very, very easy to side out for specific matchups, which is why this side deck is built in this specific way. But I feel much more comfortable having a card that's an immediate payoff for my boards rather than, you know, just grabbing like a second copy of a welcome or a big welcome. In scenarios where I do have access to a lot of my engine, I would rather have the flexibility in this deck. And it's not like opening this card is bad. Opening this card is like actually pretty good if you're going first. If you go second, you fucking hate this card. Speaking of cards that your opponent will definitely hate, we have Labyrinth setup. Now this was a card I did not really like. I always thought it was very cute. I thought it was very funny, but let's read it together. Target 2 of your Labyrinth spell or traps that are banished from your graveyard. They don't have to be different names, by the way. Shuffle them into the deck. Then if you control a fiend monster, you could set non-Labyrinth normal traps with different names directly from your deck equal to the number shuffled. So if you shuffle back, let's say, I don't know, 2 banished big welcomes, you can set a Daruma, or a Sex Cannon, or a Terrors, or a Trap Trick, or an Impulse, or anything. This is the main way how you are able to blow out shifter decks. This card is absolutely amazing into shifter decks. I played this card specifically because of this event. I expected there to be so much shifter flying around in Ritual Beast and Tenpai, and I was pretty correct. This deck doesn't really mind shifter in the same way that like Tenpai doesn't mind shifter. Tenpai doesn't mind shifter because it's able to still like OTK you if they force you to just like pass the turn, but Tenpai doesn't really, but if you put up like any resistance at all, Tenpai is not able to kill you. Additionally, they're not able to grind as well, which is really good. This card not only allows you to grind under shifter extremely well, because let's say like your banished welcome and big welcome are going to be returned back into the deck, so you're no longer like missing names, but additionally it lets you blow your fucking opponent out to smithereens, because if you're resolving Labyrinth setup against a shifter opponent, you already know like 99% of what you need to grab. If you're against like Tenpai, you're grabbing like Daruma Impulse, like your life depends on it. If you're against like Ritual Beast, you're grabbing Impulse and Overroot, like your life depends on it. Impulse is really broken. I don't think I really need to mention that. And Labyrinth setup is just a very flexible card into these matchups and to extremely grindy matchups like Centurion, where you're going to be like using like the big welcome effect a ton in order to disrupt your opponent. It's just a very extremely solid card that I am a big fan of. I'm also a big fan of siding this out, so keep that in mind. Next, engine. 3 big welcome, 3 small welcome. Small welcome, summon a lab monster from your deck. Monster card leaves the field, you can reset it. This card is really good. I mean, who would have guessed? It's an engine card. Who fucking cares? Fun fact, 2 copies of Welcome Lab alongside a Labyrinth creates a little infinite loop, because one of them will be in the graveyard, the other one will be on board. The one on board will pop a card on your opponent's board. It'll pop a monster. It's supposed to pop a monster. And the other Welcome Lab will immediately reset itself. And then on the following turn, that Welcome Lab that reset itself is able to flip itself, pop another monster, infinite money generator. How? And then we've got the absolute best card in the deck, Big Welcome Labyrinth. It lets you special summon a lab monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, then return a monster you control to the hand. And you can banish this card from your graveyard and target a fiend monster you control, or if you control a level 8 or higher fiend monster, you can target one card your opponent controls instead, return that card to the hand. This card does basically everything. It lets you trigger your leave the field effects for Lady, Furnitures, Ariana, Ariane, Welcome. It lets you bounce stuff on your opponent's board after you already used its summon effect. By the way, do not use both effects in say one turn. They're only once per turn and each only once per turn. And it may seem that the bouncing your own cards is not really that poggers, but when you think of reusing an Ariana, or triggering Furnitures that are already engraved, or reactivating a Welcome Lab, there are multiple scenarios where I have normal summoned a Coup Clock, bounced it to hand with Big Welcome, reborned my Stevie, set a Welcome Lab, then just use the Coup Clock from hand so I can activate the Welcome Lab and get off to the races to use my engine. I've done that a lot of times and it's won me a lot of games. So do not sleep on bouncing your own cards, and definitely do not sleep on bouncing your opponent's cards. And now we get into the power cards. We've got triple Daruma Cannon. Book of Eclipse, pretty broken. I don't really need to explain why. Basically just blanking your opponent's entire board for a turn and just stunning them out and being like, oh shit, I'm gonna get killed in the next turn, or my opponent's gonna get a bunch of free setup in the next turn. It's really powerful. Being able to cut off Snake Eye from being able to just use their effects, cutting off Centurion from synchro summoning, cutting off like Whitewood players from being able to synchro summon in general because you flip all their stuff face down. Did you know that in that deck, if you stop like their normal summon and they have a Munin in like the EMZ and you Daruma them, they're basically like fucked. It's so funny. Like, nice runic spells, idiot. Next, we've got Sex Cannon. This card, a lot of people are saying that,
Oh, Labyrinth doesn't really need this card anymore. Oh, Labyrinth is starting to cut this card.
in my personal opinion, this card is the only reason to play Labyrinth right now. You could say the furniture cards are good. You could say that Furos is good. You could say that this deck's matchup spread is good. Labyrinth, at least currently, or the game as a whole right now, does not have a trap card that is able to both end turns and cut off your opponent's grind at the same time. Daruma is able to end your opponent's turn, but they still have all the monsters. Cards like Overroot are able to cut into your opponent's grind, or like Dominus Impulse are able to cut into your opponent's grind because you're making them burn cards, but they don't end the turn. Sex Cannon is the only card, in my opinion, that is able to actually do both, because it not only nukes their whole board, but it also banishes those cards, which is very, very, very important. Think of like banishing their one of Flambers, or their one of Poplar, or their one of like Snake Idea Bellstar. Think of banishing like a Yubel player's like Singular Nightmare Pain, or their Nightmare Throne, or like 500 other cards that I could mention. This card is not only great at cutting off grind, but winning the game. And just the level spread that we're starting to see in this current metagame, where Centurion's playing with a lot of 8s and 4s and 6s, kind of with like the Bestials and 10s, and Yubel is able to play with 9, 10s, and 11s, and Snake Eye plays with a lot of 7s and 8s, if you play like the Cashier version. There are just a lot of wonderful decks that are very high powered right now that play extremely well into the Sex Cannon. And if you get hit by a Sex Cannon, this card basically ends your turn and ends the game, arguably, at times. So, massive, massive fan. Next, we've got Terrors of the Overroot. I was originally playing Ice Dragon's Prison in this slot because I was really scared of Yubel and Fiendsmith, but that deck sucks. That deck's basically a rogue deck now. It's still very good, but you don't see it at much frequency as you once originally did, compared to like last format, where everyone was on Fiendsmith cards, or everyone was on like Yubel. If we were in last format, I would play IDP. But this format, I feel that Terrors of the Overroot is a lot more flexible. Terrors of the Overroot is able to hit, think of very powerful cards like Nightmare Pain or Sanguine Summoning. It's able to lock out like Kashtira boards because people are starting to play Kashtira cards again for some reason. Terrors of the Overroot, just overall very, very flexible card that is able to do it all. Speaking of cards that do it all, we have Trap Trick. This card is a copy of every trap in your deck. Play 3, it's really good. Next up, we've got 1 transaction rollback. Some people play 2. I understand why people play 2, but in my opinion, this card is not a card that you really want to draw. This is not a card that you really want to set off of like Trap Trick. This is a card that is basically only ever okay to set off of like Lady Lab when you're planning on doing REA plays. Plays where you're going like REA and send rollback, like shoot for the moon. Those are extremely powerful, high rolly plays that I find are really, really good, which is why I play it as a 1-0. However, I don't think it's so good or is so worth the investment to basically roll with a 3 to 4 card combo every single game that I would be playing more than 1 copy. It is literally the definition of a card that if we draw it, it's fine. If we don't draw it, it's also fine. It's just a very flexible card that fulfills a very specific role in this deck that I appreciate very immensely, but it is not something to build the deck around. Speaking of cards to build a deck around, we have Dominus Impulse. This card, I'll say it right here and right now, this card should be banned. This card should be banned alongside cards like Imperm and Fuelos. This card is better than Imperm because it doesn't fucking target. Let's read this card together real quick. If your opponent controls a card, you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card, and if you activate its effect from your hand, the rest of this card does not matter. All you need to know is that we're playing a dark deck and we're never going to get locked by it. Additionally, it's also really cool is that you can Dominus Impulse something and then chain a furniture to pitch a trap card. So you can get the Dominus Impulse pop effect basically online whenever you want, as well as the fact that, you know, like assuming you're playing the game normally, your Dominus Impulse is always going to be destroying because you're playing Labyrinth and you're always going to have like a trap card in your graveyard. It's bananas. Card's broken. Oh my god, I hate this card. Fun fact, if you get impulsed, you want to cry. Next up, we've got 2 Imperm. Why not 3 Imperm? Because the hand trap math, when you put in the Fuelos and the Perulia, and you consider multiple draws, and the fact that this card doesn't actually fulfill any Labyrinth effects in the sense of removing monsters from the board or like stunning your opponent for a turn. Like, this card's good, like, don't get me wrong, but Labyrinth is not best deck for Imperm in the sense where Imperm as a hand trap is extremely powerful, but Imperm as a trap card is just kind of mid. And I'm actually using that word properly. And finally, triple Fuelos, 1 Perulia. I'll tell you guys right now, if you do not own Fuelos, do not play this deck. This deck struggles so much harder to go second if you're not able to, in 33% of your games, just drop a Fuelos and draw a billion cards. Fuelos is so insanely powerful for this deck. Going second ability that it is the only reason that I decided to play this deck. If like Fulos didn't exist and we still had like Dominus Impulse and all the new cards out of Rhoda, I would not play this deck. I wouldn't even play like Triple Perulia in order to fulfill it. It's just not worth it. I'm very sorry to all the budget players out there, but unfortunately this is a deck that does require a lot of financial investment if you want to play it at the top tier competitive level, at least in my opinion. And of course, we've got the one Perulia. I wanted to play another version of, I wanted to play like one more super duper sacky draw card, and Perulia just kind of ended up being that. If you're wondering why the deck's over 40 in a deck where, you know, you ideally want to draw as many like power cards or wombo combos as much as possible, this deck does play a few garnets in the sense where some cards you don't really want to open. Again, there's like this little perfect cluster of like Ardeane, Lady, Lovely, Setup, Kuklok, whatever. These are cards that are like fine to open outside of Lovely, but these aren't cards that you really want to draw frequently. So being able to like dilute your deck of consistency in this very minor sense is really, really good at being able to sort of manipulate the lack of consistency in a minor way in your favor, in the sense where the higher deck count is not really going to affect your combo potential, but it is going to drastically affect your ability to open very specific one-ofs. And this deck doesn't really care about its one-ofs. Kind of like Snake Eye in that sense, where like that deck was fine going like 45, 46, 47, 48 because it had so many one-ofs that didn't really want to open that it was just like, yeah, fuck it, we'll just go over the limit, who cares. Now onto the extra deck. This whole extra deck is a Sex Cannon extra deck outside of 3 cards. We've got levels 1 through 6. We got Millennium Eyes, Munin, Hugin. These are just level 3s. And now we get into the theory of our Sex extra deck. We play Entis as our level 4 because in case we get like Dogmatica Maximist, Entis is a good send because we can pop our opponent's board. Additionally, another good send is Baphomet, who's our level 6 for Sex Cannon. Now, Baphomet's graveyard effect is we can banish it to target a banished beast, fiend, or illusion. Guess what? All these guys are fiends, and special summon it. Now, Labyrinth has a really big issue where it can't really grab its monsters back if they're banished. Setup only is spells or traps, so if you're like Lovely gets Chaos Angeled or SP'd, you're kind of in a bad position. Baphomet is the only way in which you're able to technically grab it back. If you want to play like Dogmatica Punishment over Sex Cannon or like Terrors of the Overroot or Imperm, this makes Punishment makes these cards way better because you're able to basically use those whenever you want. But for me, in my personal opinion, these are the only good like Dogmatica Punishment sends, if you kind of catch my drift. Additionally, if you don't want to play Baphomet, you could also play Storage Pod. I promise you it will make sense. If you had to play one other card that wasn't Baphomet, Storage Pod is also a completely fine target to play for extra deck reasons we will get into again. Next, we've got ranks 3, 4, and 5. I know some people play rank 6s. I know some people play rank 7s. I know some people play level 7 fusions. I could not find the space to do so in this deck. If I had to cut one card for a level 7 fusion or 2 cards for whatever, I would cut the Typhon and Muckracker. Muckracker if I wanted to fit in a level 7, and Typhon and Muckracker if I wanted to fit in a rank 6 package. It's come up a lot, but I don't think it's come up enough for me to justify pulling the trigger. These cards are very good at grinding. Since we're kind of on this topic, we could talk about them right now. These cards are very good at breaking apart boards, grinding out games, and OTKing. Being able to double Chaos Angel someone thanks to Muckracker is very good. Being able to Muckracker OTK by like summoning the lady in defense position, then like just reborning it in attack position with the Muckracker is really good. Being able to crack a board of Typhon with 2 monsters and have your Big Welcome be live in some capacity is very efficient. Like, it's just very nice. Just awesome. And although I wish this deck had like a 16th and 17th extra deck slot, I very much understand that it is a concession that I personally am willing to make. But if you guys really want that Centurion matchup edge, feel free to cut one or both of these cards. I would definitely keep the Chaos Angel though, but out of these 3 cards, like, I guess technically Typhon first and then Muckracker. Now, our rank 3s, 4s, and 5s. Rank 3s, Acid Golem. Fucking useless, but It is technically a 3000 attack beater, which you can make with 2 overlaid chandeliers. It comes up almost never, but you know, it's good to have as an option. Double Bagusha, this card's the go. This is the one card in the extra deck that you'll actually go into like a lot, outside of like Muckracker and Chaos Angel. You don't really go into Typhon that much, because Typhon's not as good as it used to be in previous formats, but it's still just a very nice option. Bagushka, always an amazing option. Stuns your opponents, gives you time to rebuild, set a bunch of trap cards, fuck it, we ball. And last, we have Cyber Dragon Nova as our rank 5. Again, we were talking about Dogmatica Punishment, and Cyber Dragon Nova is a pretty good card to send. Because there's one, this is so fucking stupid. There's one card in our extra deck that we can play that is a machine fusion that technically slots into our extra deck. And that's Panzer fucking Dragon. This card is not real. This card is just funny, but technically it is a machine fusion monster. Is it good? Absolutely fucking not. Is it funny to show your opponent? And the 1 in a million chance where they make you mill a Cyber Dragon Nova and an Entis to go Nova 1, Entis 2, and you pop out a Panzer Dragon out of nowhere. Yes. If you want like an actual target, you could play like Mechaba as like a sex cannon target for like a 9/3/3 line against Centurion. It's technically possible. I wouldn't recommend it, but you know, it's an option. And of course, Typhon, Chaos Angel, Muckracker. Muckracker, good for OTKs. Chaos Angel, good for clearing the board. Typhon, good for clearing the board. And let's get onto the side deck. So this side deck is a bunch of going first cards and a bunch of going second cards. Our going second cards are the last 2 Perulias, 3 Ash Blossoms. This card will basically only ever come in if I know for a fact that I'm going second or I'm against like fucking Tenpai. Because in the main, 1-for-1 hand traps in a trap deck like this are not very good. Again, see my reasoning for like Infinite Impermanence. Ash Blossom is a very good card, but unfortunately in this specific deck needs as many cards in its hand as possible to combo, because it is a trap deck and each one of its cards is so individually valuable that even being like 1 or 2 cards down is enough to basically like cost you the entire game and be considered breaking. Like, think about how weak hands are in Labyrinth when you open Lovely compared to just not opening Lovely. Like, you can still open like the Ariana Furniture Wombo combo, but if you hard open Lovely, your hands are basically just 1 extra interruption short, and being 1 interruption short in a format as high powered as this, and in most modern formats honestly, is something that you're not going to really like that much. So I delegated Ash Blossom to the side. It's a card you could draw off of like Full Rose and Perulia. It's really, really good going second, blah blah blah. You guys get the idea. We've got the 2 Perulias, I just mentioned those, and 2 Nibiru. I think Nibiru is really fucking good. I know Nibiru's like not amazing right now in the sense where like Azamina and Tenpai and Fiendsmith stuff, like it's just overall not a very fun experience to be looking at your Nibiru and your opponent's board of like, you know, an Il Silva to negate your shit. But Nibiru in other certain matchups, think of like Chimera or Branded or like Sun Avalon to an extent if they don't open Princess or whatever. Nibiru is very, very solid into those matchups. And I think that having this card as an option that Labyrinth already natively likes, just having like this one specific super duper blowout card is really, really valuable in its own capacity and right. And don't forget, Chainlink 1 Nibiru, Chainlink 2 Furniture Pitch Nibiru. Everything will be cleared, the world shall be laid bare, no token shall be summoned, and you still get a set of trap card. It's awesome. Next we got Triple Solemn Judgment. You could play the runic spells if you really want to, but the runic spells don't protect against stuff like Cosmic Cyclone. The runic spells don't protect against your opponent's Judgment if they're like playing Judgment to beat your trap cards. It's very weird, but I find that like after enough testing, I think that Solemn Judgment is just a little bit better, as well as the fact that if you lose a runic spell, you can sometimes strand yourself without Sex Cannon because you lose access to your Hugin because it banishes itself in order to protect your stuff, and you lose access to like very specific Sex Cannon lines, which has come up before. But the argument for playing the runic spells is you can summon mutant and scam in time, so you know, fuck it, we ball. We got double DDG because who would have guessed that Shifter against certain decks is very good. We also have D-Barrier, who would have guessed that Calling Synchro or Fusion against certain decks is really good. And Eradicator. This card is definitely not that good. I don't know why I'm playing it. Like, it's fine. Against certain matchups, it's really good, like Tenpai or Cash, or like Fire King Snake Eye. This card, unfortunately, because of the fact that you can only really get to it through like Lady, is looking more and more cuttable by the day. If you told me to replace it with a card, I would probably just play like anti-spell Fragrance, because again, your deck plays like 2 spells, so it will never affect you, as well as the fact that it's just immediately activatable. You don't have to like jump through any hoops. But that's just me personally. And if you've ever wanted to look at a giant page of the most dog shit Labyrinth text with just no reasoning behind any of it, let's just go through like all of it real quick. Lord of the Heavenly Prison. Extra stuff, kind of like Solemn Judgment, and it lets you set a trap card from your deck, or spell. You can set up if you really want to. Sphere Mode and Lava Golem. These are really good board breakers if you're on the stun variant. We've got Radiant, the Kaiju. Specifically this one because it is a Dark Fiend, and if you open multiples of it, it's a Dark Fiend you control. It's level 8, so it turns on Big Welcome. It's got a lot of funny shenanigans with that. The Pistials are pretty good. Pistials are always kind of like this cool flexible spot. I don't think they're really that good because Fiendsmith and Ubel aren't really that powerful right now, so I wouldn't really give it too much consideration personally. We got the Unchained package in Sharvara and Abominable Chamber and Escape, but mainly Escape. And the Yama, of course. Escape is really, really good in Unchained Lab because it triggers your lab stuff, and Shavara is a really, really good way of being like a pseudo Called by the Grave on like Imperm or Valor on your Ariana by like chaining Shavara to pop it and protect your stuff, blah 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 blah. Next up, we have Shifter. Don't play this card. You can if you really, really want to, but it's just so unnecessary. It hurts your own plays so much. Like, now if you're playing like Labyrinth setup, it's alright, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Tackle Crusader. You could pitch this off of furniture to like Book of Moon your opponent's stuff. It's not good, but it's funny. We've got Mudora, we've got Keldo. You pitch these off furniture, that you shuffle your opponent's stuff. It's pretty nice in certain matchups. We've got Wannabe. This card is kind of like Backjack. Oh yeah, Backjack should definitely be in here. In the sense where it's a way for you to search for trap cards and be able to like give your deck more consistency and being able to like search for specific blowouts or more engine pieces and dig super duper deep in the way that certain other cards can't. But I find these cards to be like a little too slow, a little too clunky, kind of difficult to trigger, and sometimes they just whiff, which is not fun. We got Lightning Storm, we got Duster, generic board breakers, we got Gravekeeper's Inscription. I mean, it's funny, it's not good. Got Called by the Grave. This card might actually be a pretty good card to replace the Eradicator we just mentioned. I think that Called by the Grave in this deck is actually pretty nice because, again, like I mentioned at the start, this deck doesn't really lose to like matchups. It loses to hand traps, it loses to generic stuff, and having like a sort of insurance policy against that, which is why Crossout's also in here, is not bad. We've got the runic cards, we've got I don't know why setup's in here. We've got the runic cards. Again, they're just protection. If you wanted to play the runic cards in order of priority, I would personally play them in. It would be Flashing Fire, Destruction, Tip, and Freezing Curses. I think that all of these are kind of mid and stupid, but I think that Tip as the third one is the best, and just picking 2 of your favorites is the best, because Tip into like a Flashing Fire is definitely super duper good. Tip into a whatever, it's just poggers. Super Poly is a really good card this format, in my opinion. It's got a lot of great targets in like, you know, the Azamina stuff, and to certain matchups, it's got a lot of good generic targets. Think of the Adagnister versus like Fire King, or you know, just the classic Mud Dragon and Garura. Again, but it sort of falls under this weird category of it's not perfect because it's a 2-for-1, it doesn't win you the game, and you don't really want to go second, and blah blah. We've got Evenly Matched. It's fine. I don't think it's that good right now. And we're starting to pass into dog shit territory, so you're gonna have to excuse my reasoning. We have Altar for Tribute. You play this card. We also have Try and Guess in here, you know, the fucking burn card, or you know, like, you know, the Dark Lord burn. Fucking who cares? All you need to know is that these are trap cards that gain you life points. So wink for reasons why you might want those. But you may be thinking, oh, why don't we play Secret Barrel? Why don't we play like Secret Blast or blah blah blah? The reason is because these cards are able to be played in scenarios where your opponent cannot take damage. So think of like scenarios like the Pearly Sleepy Memory, where it sets your next effect damage to 0. So even if you do try and hit them with a Secret Barrel, they could just basically blank it. So the fact that you can gain life points with these cards is very, very good. If you want the try and guess thing, you just call like XEs. Like, what fucking deck is playing 50 XEs? Rizal? That doesn't exist yet. We've got Waybridge. Don't play this card. This card is so dog shit, but it's kind of funny. I mean, it makes your opponent send. That's pretty good. Doesn't trigger the furnitures though, because your opponent taking action. You have Escape. You have Chain Disappearance. Oh my god, what fucking drugs was I on when I made this list? When an opponent is special summons a monster, or just in general, summons a monster with 1,000 or less attack, you banish that monster, and your opponent banishes all cards with the same name from their hand or deck. I think my logic was that you could Chain Disappearance like Poplar or like a Pearly monster. Don't do that. That is fucking awful. Don't do it. You have more respect for yourself. We got Compulse. Compulse is actually still like just a generically really good card in Labyrinth. Like, who would have guessed that? Bounce a card, pretty good. Mainly for the extra deck though, like Princess or like Ambler Whale. Like, this card's just like super duper nice at doing what it does. We have Magic Deflector. It's kind of like a tutorable anti-spell. Not a big fan of it because I don't really like searching floodgates most of the time. Like, searching D-Barrier is really, really strong, but I wouldn't recommend that should be like your only game plan, because decks have evolved at the current rate to be able to play through these certain floodgates. Speaking of floodgates, we have Gozen and Rivalry. I know anti-spell's in here, but we already talked about it earlier. Lab is a deck that only plays dark monsters, so fuck it, play Gozen. Rivalry, because Lab is a deck that only plays feed monsters, so fuck it, play it. These cards are definitely just like flex cards that kind of come in and out of the meta. I didn't want to overload my main deck with too many going first cards. I didn't want to overload my side deck with too many like weird specific matchup cards. I kind of wanted my side deck to be relatively generic. At least that's how I built this deck. And for the extra deck, we've got Anima. You can link a Ku Klux or a Backjack into Anima to like turn on an SP. We got the SP, of course, in here. Couldn't find space, but I would love to play it alongside the Anima. We've got Rushka, the Venture Duo. You can technically play this. It's not good, but it is a spellcaster that you can use to turn off your opponent's secret village. Is it good? No. Is it funny? Also, yes. Not also. It's also a way to turn on your SP Little Knight, because you could like normal an Ariana, grab an extra guy, and you could convert the Ariana into a Clarion Rushka and then like make the SP. It's pretty nice. We've got the Unchained Soul of Rage and the Yama. They're basically just shown in here. We got Dark. Dark is very easy to make in this deck because this deck is only fucking Darks. And it's got like some application, but the secret real application is to use this card as a fucking Mystic Tomato, because you can add a dark monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand, and if you remember what deck we're playing, there are a lot of them. It's specifically mainly just Chandelier and Ariane, so being able to grab those out of the deck off of just, you know, the world's shittiest Mystic Tomato is pretty nice at times. We've got Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Shout out to Miwa Bell for giving me a copy of this. I treasure it so deeply. And because we're playing this weird like combo lab variant, being able to just like fill your board with like 500 furnitures and like normal summoned girls, and be able to like convert all of it at once into just like a big blanket boss fuck ass monster is really, really good. I really, really like it. You could even play like Closed Goddess of the Moon, like, you know, Little Moon. Like, she's good. You could, I don't know, make more stuff with it. It's awesome. And if you want to play an additional copy of a rank 4 that's not Bagushka for your sex scaling lines, Abyss Roller works really, really well. It's really good into Fire King right now. It's really good into like the Fiendsmith stuff and Ubel and blah 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 blah. Dweller fucking OP. Goat card. And that's the deck profile. I know this was a very long video relative to, you know, other deck profiles, but this is a deck that I am very passionate about. I've talked at length with people about this. other content creators, friends. I have sunk so much time, so much money into this deck that you guys would not believe. I actually counted how many deck lists I had for Labyrinth. I had 38 individual deck lists that I had just on Edo Pro, not even counting Dueling Book. This is a deck that I personally really love, and I personally recommend to anyone who's trying to find a deck that's not like meta, that's not, you know, like boring or just like some generic ass combo deck. Someone who wants something fresh, something fun, something that they will enjoy playing, that is both strong, powerful, fresh, whatever. I highly recommend Labyrinth. Thank you guys so much for watching this deck profile, and of course I will see you guys in the next video.